Hello and welcome to all our viewers tuned in with me live as we present you our daily English news. Headlines for today: UN Security Council will discuss the crisis in Ethiopia today. Over 5,000 people died in Tigray last year in relation to the blockade imposed by the Ethiopian government. And CNN has promoted Nima Elbagir to Chief International Investigative Correspondent. The UN Security Council will discuss the crisis in Ethiopia, and the Security Council has put Ethiopia on its agenda at the request of the United Kingdom and Council members. The UK mission in New York wrote its Twitter account that more people are in famine-like conditions in Tigray as to the rest of the world combined. The UK government called for an end to this man-made famine. Over 5,000 people died in Tigray last year in relation to the blockade imposed by the Ethiopian government. This report, as reported by Associated Press, says that nearly 1,500 people died of malnutrition in just part of Ethiopia's blockaded Tigray region over a 4-month period last year, including more than 350 young children. A new report by the region's health bureau has released. It cites more than 5,000 blockade-related deaths in all from hunger and disease, and largest official death toll yet associated with the country's war. Deaths are alarmingly increasing, including from easily prevented diseases like rabies as medicines run out or expire, says the head of Tigray's health bureau, Agus Godfai. He told the Associated Press last year as the findings were being compiled, "This is one of the worst times of my life, I can tell you." The deaths were overwhelmingly from malnutrition, infection diseases, and non-communicable diseases as the Health Bureau and partners sought to gauge the effects on Tigray's population of its health system being largely destroyed by combatants. The deaths do not reflect people in combat, Hagos told AP on Thursday in a call from the Tigrayan capital, Mekelle, though the report reflects a small percentage of deaths from airstrikes. The mortality assessment covered just roughly 40% of Tigray, and he says since occupation of some areas by combatants and the lack of fuel caused by the blockade has limited data gathering and aid delivery as well. According to the bureau head, severe acute malnutrition in children under 5, at less than 2% in Tigray before the war, was now above 7%. The assessment found at least 369 children under 5 had died of malnutrition, part of over 1,400 people in total. Hagos told AP that without medical supplies or vaccines, easily preventable diseases like measles were emerging in Tigray, and COVID-19 has begun to spread as well. HIV patients are coming all the time to my office to ask if drugs are coming in or not, but my hands are just simply tied, he says. Ethiopia's government cut off almost all access to food aid, medical supplies, cash, and fuel in June last year when the Tigray forces regained control of the region. Since then, the United Nations has repeatedly warned that less than 15% of the needed supplies have been entering Tigray under the blockade. But under a new wave of pressure this month after Tigray forces withdrew from Amhara and Afar, Ethiopia's foreign ministry, in a statement on Sunday, said it was working with aid partners to facilitate daily cargo flights to Tigray to transport much-needed medicine and supplies. It is not clear when the daily flights will begin, though the international community of the Red Cross on Wednesday announced that it has made its first delivery of medical supplies to Tigray since September, calling it a huge relief. The Ethiopian government spokesman Legessa Tulu and Health Minister Lia Tadessa did not immediately respond to question on Thursday about the daily flights and when the government's blockade would be lifted completely to allow full access to the region. Comprehensive reporting on Tigray war said to be nearly impossible due to the government's repression. Since the beginning of this year, Ethiopia's National Defense Force allegedly carried out airstrikes that killed at least 108 civilians in Tigray. As medical and food supplies run dangerously low, the World Food Program has warned of a humanitarian disaster. About 50,000 children are believed to be severely malnourished, though the figure could get much higher soon. But despite the scale of crisis, comprehensive reporting on the conflict has been made nearly impossible, and no journalist has set foot in Tigray from outside the region for more than 6 months. Verifying facts and collecting testimonies from residents on the ground is further prevented by an all-out communications blockout. Instead, information trickles out of Tigray through aid agencies and scarce satellite communication points in the regional capital of Mekelle. Since the declaration of a countrywide state of emergency on the 2nd of November 2021, a climate of media repression has further deepened the information vacuum. We have a situation where there is no due process or no fair trial, said Angela Quintel, head of the African program at the Committee to Protect the Journalist. 2 journalists have been killed by the government security officer in the past year. That is the ultimate form of censorship, he stated. In early 2002, the CPJ recorded at least 14 journalists behind bars. The government recently released 6 of them, but the country remains the second worst jailer of journalists in the sub-Saharan Africa, according to, again, Angela Quintel. Foreign reporters, too, have faced intimidation and even deportation. Some have had their licenses suspended temporarily or permanently. Scared for their safety, dozens of Ethiopian journalists have decided to go into exile. Some face double jeopardy of being targeted as a media practitioner as well as an ethnic Tigrayan. Currently, the government is not even using the law. It's like a mafia state. It can just take your freedom, your property, your everything, a journalist who fled to a neighboring country told DW. The trend of journalists leaving the country has widened the information gap domestically. What we have now is either a state media propaganda from psychopaths from the private media, he lamented. The Ethiopian National Defense Force requests rescheduling of repatriation of the force from the UN mission in Abyei. The Office in Chief of General Staff under the Ministry of Defense wrote to the letter of Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressing its concern that delay in the reparations of its forces in Abyei could compilation between Ethiopia and Sudan, given what it's called Sudan's provocations. The office indicated that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs delayed by 23 days a request for the expeditious repatriation of thousands of Ethiopians peacekeepers from Abyei. The Office of the Chief of the General Staff asked the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to write a letter to the UN headquarters in New York requesting a clear rotation of PLUN urgently. It also asked to notify the UN to facilitate repatriation of all Ethiopian mission personnel by 20 of March 2022 as all equipment by the 25th of May. The office underlined the need for uninterrupted and speedy pulling out of forces once it has started to avoid any possible problems between these two countries. UN Undersecretary General for Peace Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix had announced that the replacement of Ethiopian peacekeepers by other forces would begin in February and last until March 2022. Sudan had demanded replacement of the Ethiopian forces with the UNISFA, wake of a border dispute within Ethiopia. The all-Ethiopian forces in Abyei mission has more than 5,300 troops. CNN has promoted senior international correspondent Nima El-Bagir to the role of chief international investigative correspondent. A London-based Sudanese journalist, El-Bagir has broken countless stories for CNN from war and crisis zones, reporting on human rights abuses in places like Ethiopia's Tigray region, Libya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, as well as Yemen. Nima exposed some of the worst atrocities perpetrated by the Ethiopian government and its allies, the invading Eritrean troops, as well as the Amhara expansionist forces in places like Aksum, Takaza River in Humera, and Mariam Dinkilat. She also expressed the presence of Eritrean invading forces despite months of denial by the Ethiopian and Eritrean governments. In 2017, Nima El-Bagir's undercover reporting exposed migrants being sold at slave auctions in Libya and promoted response from the government and the United Nations as well. El-Bagir has scooped up numerous awards in her career, including the Royal Television Society's Television Journalist of the Year Award in 2020. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye.